Welcome back to Tabletop Glory. Today we're going to be revisiting orcs. Now, I've always kind of done orcs in the same way. However, I've also really enjoyed a lot of how other people paint orcs. A lot of people tend to put a lot of contrast in the face, which is something that I don't typically do. And part of that is because I think I'm obsessed with trying to get smooth blends and transitions when oftentimes you don't actually need to have a smooth blend. You just have to get it in the ballpark. And on a miniature whose face is about that big, the ballpark is pretty wide. So being able to kind of get those high contrast blends works out just fine as long as the colors are remotely similar. So today's video, I've kind of mocked up a bit of a bust. I would have done a full orc. I ran out of legs. I thought I had more legs. I don't have more legs. So I mocked up a bit of a bust. We're going to kind of be focusing in and around the shoulders and the head and the arms. I'm not really going to worry super much about the torso. We're going to treat this like a miniature bust, and we're going to just kind of go at it and try and match some of the details to two artists who I've decided to focus on today. Now, our first example is by Sprocket. They have a wonderful orc flesh tutorial on their website. Now, I couldn't find a YouTube channel for this individual, but if I am able to find one, then I will link it in the description. I really like how much contrast they got in the face on this miniature. It really comes to life. Now, I did choose this one simply because it is a miniature, unlike our second example, which is by Light Studio, which is their Jork Sparrow, which is an actual bust. With it being a bust, it's going to be significantly larger, which in theory kind of makes doing a lot of what I'm going to be attempting to do a little bit easier. But in the long run, I think a lot of what we see on both miniatures could be applicable to actual scale models that we're going to be playing with in Warhammer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way real quick. I was doing this on a live stream, so there might be some times where the camera kind of dips in and out of focus a little bit. I'm going to try to pick points where obviously the camera is focusing as well as it could, all things considered. So, got that out of the way. I may have fallen into the trap of doing what felt right as opposed to experimenting. And then I realized I was doing that, so then I started to experiment. And then I found this combination of like trying to push contrast and then going back in and blending the contrast into my soft blends that I had already done. And I got pretty close to some of the nicer paint jobs that I'd say I used to do back in the day before I started really knocking things back for time and commission's sake. And I'm kind of excited to really kind of get back in the ballpark of where I've kind of been and where I'd like to get back to. So without further ado, I'm using a mixture of different greens to do the skin tone. Obviously my darker ones in the shadow and the brighter ones in the highlights. However, I'm thinning them down into a glaze and building them up over multiple layers. And this does a really, really great job at giving the illusion of the skin tone feeling quite real. Something I've had an issue with in the past, especially when it comes to orcs, is I'm not really sure what colors to undertone skin with, as using a red doesn't always tend to make the green feel flesh-like, and it kind of makes it look a little putrid in my opinion. So starting out with a nice, vibrant, almost yellow color, like a lemon kind of color for my base coat, really worked out quite well. And so I have purple in my shadows, and I kind of go in through a sepia lemony kind of color all the way up to just barely a tiny bit of white on the highest most edges, and that kind of really played into the skin tones and got me this really nice finish. The colors I ended up going with, starting from the lightest going to the darkest, is Ogren Camo, Deathworld Forest, Moot Green, and Warpstone Glow. Now, Warpstone Glow and Moot Green ended up being my, what I refer to as mixture colors, or mother colors, as some people might put it. These are the colors that I'm mixing into my other greens and into anything else that ended up on the skin tone to try to help blend everything together and to make it feel cohesive. Deathworld Forest and Ogryn Camo, I would say, did 90% of the legwork. And Warpstone Glow did a really good job at kind of bringing the greens into the shadow and giving it more of a traditional orc feel, at least in the shadows. And then Ogryn Camo worked really great to blend in with just a tiny touch of Moot Green to really make those highlights pop. All in all, I'd say this whole process took about an hour, just to kind of give you a rough idea of how long it took me to kind of get the skin tone to a point where I was really happy with it. Now, what some of the more eagle-eyed viewers might realize is that I'm actually not building up my skin tones in a way that you might typically do, going from darkest to lightest. I'm actually kind of bouncing around back and forth, pushing that contrast into some of the crevices of the muscle, like through the elbow or around some of the muscle structure. And I'm really focusing on that transitional blend going in from the bottom of the arms and that deeper shadow into the highlights on the top of the arm. I'm planning to put a wash over the skin tone, so I know I don't need to get at least the upper side super cohesive, as the wash is going to kind of help blend all of that together. But I do know that that blend is going to be a little bit harder in the shadows because the wash isn't going to quite blend things together. So it's really important to get that transfer point as blended out as I can. And I'm wanting to try to follow the curvature of the muscle, so that's going to result in me needing to kind of go back and forth between my highlight and my shadow color and really kind of play things by ear depending upon where on the arms or on the body that might be. So the rest of this isn't really super important at this point. Today's video was really just about revisiting orc skin tone, but I wanted to go ahead and put a little bit more time in while I still had some time to paint, as I'm kind of throwing this together on Thursday. This week has just been, the whole month has just been crazy, but that's neither here nor there. Go Gunther Fur in the shadows, Skeletal Horde in the highlights, and a little bit of Gargax Sewer to kind of blend those two surfaces together. Anywhere that there are straps or leather, and then I try my best to kind of keep it off of anything that's wood, like the main handle of this weapon, which I just do in all over in Go Gunther Fur. I did the kind of ponytail pop knot thing kind of in a few different shades of blue. Wasn't really happy with what I got. Still not 100% sure if I'm really happy with where I ended up. Black hair with a gray highlight that I was able to mix with a little bit of my blue, my Fenrisian blue, that I ultimately settled for with the wrapping around the ponytail. And I didn't really end up doing anything for the body. I kind of just left his shirt and his like overalls as the default gray from my priming. If you guys would like to see me put a pair of legs on this guy and finish him proper, please let me know, and I'll be happy to make a follow-up video where I finish painting the rest of this guy. In any case, in the mouth, I've kind of just painted it a generic pinky color, and then all of the teeth in white. I am a little disappointed in myself for not trying to get a little bit more detail in the teeth, but I'm not really sure if I have the skill or the brush size to do much more than just a generic white. Maybe that's something to try next time. Dotted the eyes with a little bit of white, made sure the inside of the nose and the inside of the ears had some pink. I noticed that there were some veins on the arms as well as some scars, so I went ahead and did a little pink on those. And just a little extra pop of color that I've seen some other people do. On the backs of the elbows, I put a little bit of pink and blended it into the green as well, just to kind of give a little splash of realism there. Made sure that the shadows in between the fingers were deep enough that everything felt cohesive and felt real. I could have picked out the claws in a white or something similar, but I was feeling a little pressed for time and wanting to get this video done and get it out there for you guys so that I can get it out in time for October. And then I decided to do something that I haven't done in a while. Non-metallic metal. And although I wasn't happy in the moment, the final result, now that I've got it in my hand and I'm looking at it, I'm actually pretty impressed with myself. Now, if you're new to the channel, you'll know that I'm colorblind. I'm red-green colorblind, which oftentimes means that doing non-metallic metal gold is very difficult for me because the colors that I am the most susceptible to having difficulty seeing is in the range that you typically use for painting non-metallic metal gold. That said, though, I seem to be able to do a significantly better job at painting non-metallic metal gold than I do silver, or steel, or anything else that's got blue in it, which leads me to think that I might also have a bit of an issue with seeing the color blue in some regards, and I think that maybe it's a bit muted, which is why I don't tend to push blue maybe necessarily in the right value when it comes to doing steel, which means I'm going to have to come up with some kind of a formula that I can follow every time I do either steel or silver or whatever in order to try and lock in that feeling. Now, I do admit I think I've fallen somewhere in between steel and stone with this. However, early on it was feeling very much like ice, and then quickly moved into rock and then started to push into steel. And I think if I had put in some rust effects at the end there, it definitely would have sold for a old rusty steel sword. But I've kind of run out of time, like I keep saying, and I really just needed to get this video edited so that I don't have to worry about my schedule for the rest of the week. I'm sorry, guys. If you want to see me finish this model, genuinely, if you want to see me finish this model, I will find some legs online that I can 3D print because I don't have any orc legs, and I will finish this model. I will see it through. I will do all of the things I keep saying I wanted to do but didn't get a chance to do. I know multi-part series don't really work on YouTube, but I'm willing to do it because I think it could make for an interesting video, but I'm only going to do that if it's something you're interested in seeing. And if this video has been up for a while, and I have made that video, I will either link it at the end of the video or I will link it somewhere around in here. So do keep an eye out for that. So what did I do different this time than what I did the first time I attempted non-metallic metal? Well, I started with the highlights, which a lot of the tutorials I'm seeing online tell you to start with the shadows. I end up covering up most of what I'm laying down, but what starting with this is doing is it's kind of allowing my brain to see where those final highlights need to end up, which has resulted in me being a bit more cautious when adding certain colors so that I'm able to build up the blends that I think need to be there, and I end up with, I think, a better range of colors next to one another to really sell the illusion that this is meant to be either metal or stone. Now you're going to notice that there's some brown wash. This is some of that sewage color from Contrast Paint line. I just put a little on, dabbed it onto both sides. This was just to add a little pop of color. My hope was that this would show through a little bit in the final rendition of the sword, we'll call it. I was hoping that I would add a little bit of contrast in colors. Initially, I was thinking I was going to add lots of blues and reds and a lot of this brown color and kind of just do a real leopard spot all over the weapon and then start building up the final colors for this steel, with my hopes that this leopard spotting would kind of sell the illusion of perhaps some kind of reflection within the metal. I don't think I've really sold that, and I think I do need to study some other non-metallic metals that other people have done, especially for weapons. And I'm gonna try to go look up some of that and get a better idea of how I should lay out shadows for doing stuff like this in the future. You know, a lot of YouTubers say that you're not going to get good at non-metallic metal if you don't start somewhere, and starting on swords or rings or little things like that are a great way to kind of experiment and start to learn the way that shadows interact with different shapes, and can really help to build some confidence in doing full-fledged armor. I really feel like I dove off the deep end the first time I tried to do non-metallic metal, but ultimately, I'm really happy with this second attempt, and it is making me feel more confident in my desire to try and do more again in the future. Now, a common theme is that I keep kind of doing this glazing over and over again, and it might be a bit difficult to tell. I'm actually glazing in a mixture very lightly of a rust gray kind of mixed in with a very dark Cantor blue, and it's very thin. And I'm building this up slowly to try to build up my shadows. And I'm kind of doing this glaze all over my highlights with hopes that this is going to add a lot of texture into the shadows. And that as I re-highlight again on top of that, I can get better control of the shape and the volume on the surface of the blade itself. You'll also notice that I keep re-establishing that highlight over and over again. Again, I'm doing what I think is necessary in order to help my eyes understand and interpret what I'm looking at, full well knowing that there's a good chance that I'm going to end up covering this up in the next step. But again, I'm colorblind and I'm new to this, so I'm taking every available step that I can to try and make learning this process a little easier for myself. Who knows, maybe by the end of next year, I'll be a lot better at non-metallic metal and you'll see me doing this step a lot less. Or maybe you'll see me doing it a lot more because it really helps. Only time's gonna tell, and the same thing can be said for you when you're trying to learn something new as well. Do what's gonna make things easier for you. One of the last things I want to do before our grand reveal here is I want to ask you guys a very important question, and that is, do you want to see longer videos? I know that longer videos oftentimes mean that you're not able to watch the entire video in one sitting. I absolutely get that. Today's video is pretty monstrous compared to videos we've been uploading in the past, but you'll notice that my duration has slowly been increasing over the last few months. I'm making longer format videos because they seem to be doing well in the algorithm, at least for other people and seemingly for me as well. But my curiousness, or my curiosity more or less, is do you really want to see longer format videos? I know a lot of you guys say that you have a hard time keeping up with me speaking quickly, as well as you have a hard time keeping up with the high-speed video sometimes and really seeing what I'm doing while I'm talking about it. It's one of the reasons why I try to not do anything faster than 2 times speed in any of my videos. Otherwise, I try to always put on screen just how fast things are sped up. But in any case, I'd love to hear back from you guys on what you'd actually like to see from the channel. And without further ado, our grand reveal. And I learned more than I was expecting to, and honestly had a lot of fun doing it. This was a neat experiment, and it's a new way of approaching Bitbox that I think I'm going to continue to do in the future, where I try to use Bitbox as not just a way of showing off like individual tutorials, but actually using them to look at what other painters are doing and try to develop my own style of that. And I think that's going to be the best way for me to grow going forward. And honestly, it's probably a pretty great way for you guys to use a lot of your bits at home too, to kind of just experiment around with something instead of experimenting around on the model that you want to do it on for the first time. get yourself a little bit of practice under your belt, so to speak. In any case, thanks so much for watching. May your display case always be filled, and your pile of shame never run empty. Until next time.
Space Marine!